Hi, so welcome to what I'm now going to do as a weekly thing. I'm now calling it Wow Flash. It's sort of like the World of Warcraft, only this is going to be a weekly thing that just catches up on all what I think are the major news points of the week. I'm basically going to put my money where my mouth is. Obviously, you get a lot of people who sort of say, okay, there's nothing. There's obviously a content drought in Water Journal. We know that. We've had content droughts for the last few expansions now towards the end. Of course, this one has lasted most of the expansions, so it's a little bit different. But there is always stuff to talk about in the World of Warcraft, always. And I'm going to put my money where my mouth is, as I say, and talk about some of those things each week. This week, obviously, there has been quite a lot, so it's an easy one to start with. First of all, we have now had the Warcraft movie release in America, and I now sort of see why, and I sort of did, I think, a week ago, why it is that it's released in the US so much later than everywhere else. And it seems clear that it was always expected to be a film that would be more to the tastes of people outside of North America, should we say, US and Canada perhaps, than there. So they've left it later, so the film has built up a certain amount of momentum before it was released in the US, so therefore no one can turn around and say this film hasn't done very well, because it's done very well without the US market. Obviously, it would have been nice, or it would be nice, because we don't know what's happening, it would be nice if it does really, really well in the US as well. But it has done stunning in China. In fact, they knew it was going to anyway. The pre-booking sales were through the roof. It is set to become the biggest film China has ever seen, and China is very much an emerging, in fact, very big even now, cinema market. Europe less so. Individual countries in Europe, so I think even Europe as a whole is much less of a cinema market. We don't really have, like in the major cities, there'll be really big fancy cinemas, but not really outside of those. Where I live, for example, the cinema I saw it at has quite small screens. You obviously don't get a lot of people going to the cinema very often. It doesn't seem to be a British thing very often. And perhaps there's other countries in Europe as well. But yeah, China's done really well there. Sequel hasn't been confirmed, but all but nailed on now. Even Duncan Jones was tweeting it's pretty much there now, the sequel. I don't know whether he'll look forward to that or not, because he has said that, you know, it's been a big thing for him, this 3.5-year project for him, and he's never done anything like it. Whether he will relish going straight onto another one like that, I don't know. From what he's been saying, I sort of think he'd be reluctant to, but at the same time, surely he'd be well up for doing the second film as well, given that he was not just director of this project, but essentially the writer as well. In terms of specifically World of Warcraft news, of course, we had the announcement. This is actually quite funny. It ties in with the Warcraft movie thing. We had the announcement via Facebook. I think it was actually written by Facebook. It didn't seem to me to be a Blizzard press release, about the link with Facebook so that you can sign in with that. I'm not quite sure how that works with the authenticator, and stream directly onto Facebook. No one, I don't think, has any real idea what this is going to mean, if anything. But it's quite strange that this piece of news was released on the same day as what was being billed as the global premiere of the Warcraft movie. This was the premiere in the US. I'm not quite sure how you call it a global premiere when the film has already opened in most of the world. But that's how it was billed. And in terms of Legion, there has been quite a lot of stuff. I put a video out last night simply because this is only out for a very limited period of time, and I didn't know that when I came back from work I'd be able to do the same thing. But when the pre-expansion patch comes out, the pre-Legion patch comes out, we are going to have an event. We don't always have an event every expansion. They tend to have the events when it is sort of Legion-y based. Or Scourge based or something like that. So yeah, there is an event. It doesn't seem dissimilar to previous Legion invasion events, but it's done in the style of the modern game. So I showed an example of that last night. We've got to test that in the beta now, but it's really very, very limited. So I've put my feedback in for that. And then the devs have been holding all sorts of interviews, really. A lot of these pieces of information are fairly inconsequential. It's just sort of saying, yeah, why we're doing this. Some of them are a bit more interesting. I'll just pick out a few of the ones. First of all, and I'm really pleased for this, especially if it's exactly as I think it's going to be, there are 3 raid tiers for Legion. The great fear, and I think the assumption on a lot of people's parts, was it was going to be straight like WoD, because just like in WoD, we're going to start off with a 7-boss raid that doesn't have tier gear. Then we're going to have like a 10-boss raid. It's really hot, so again, it's always hot. Except it's been raining today, so it's also humid. I don't like humid. I don't like hot. So apologies for if I keep mopping my brow, especially with these lights on me as well. And then another raid after that. And we thought that would be it. And we're going to have a long, slow death as they yet again try to bring out an expansion really quickly. Doesn't look like they're going to. Looks like they've accepted. I hope this is not what they're saying, but this is what I hope they're thinking, that they accept that it takes a certain amount of time to make an expansion to test it. Because, you know, if they were to actually bring out an expansion every year, there's no way we could do the beta testing properly, because we'd have to start doing beta testing or alpha testing, at least open, like the public alpha testing, as soon as the new expansion comes out. Madness. Whereas right now, where you've got a certain number of people, I'm not going to say the majority by any means, but a certain number of people, like myself, who've finished the content and have got plenty of time for testing. So, yeah. So there's going to be a 3rd raid tier. So, yes, I was really pleased about that. They have talked about certain features not being implemented at launch, but that's fine. We're okay with that. That sort of thing does happen. It's a lot better than this feature isn't going to, you know, appear at launch to this feature isn't going to appear at all. So that's the thing. They've also talked about very, very solid content patches, not like the basically one content patch we had in Warlords of Draenor, as they conceded. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a separate video, I think next week, because there's something I want to tie into that. The really interesting thing I thought, though, was about artifacts. There's a little statement here I'm reading. Where is it now? Basically, what they're saying is, or what they were saying is, they thought that with the artifact system, it would save them having to do lots of weapons. And then they found out it actually means doing loads and loads of weapons, because you've got one weapon for each spec. Remember, weapons at the moment in the game, they'll be shared between different specs. You know, if you've got, you know, two-handed weapon, for example, two-handed axe, there's multiple characters that can use that, and so on. Whereas it's meant one for each spec, and they've had to do that. And then there's all the different colour reskins, probably not so much, but the different designs for them as well. So it's actually meant they've had a lot more to do. And it was almost like the way it was stated, it's almost like they brought in the artifact system to save themselves some time. That hasn't happened. That hasn't happened at all. They've talked about professions again. About there's profession quest lines from starting at level 100, finishing at 110. I've already brought out the blacksmithing one for that. The enchanting one will be coming out very shortly. I want to bring out the gathering one ASAP, but I also want to make sure that I can get some reasonable footage for that. And I'm delaying on my herbalist, actually. I'm lagging behind on that, so that might be a little later. But each week, I'm going to try and bring out a different one or every couple of weeks. And then I'm close to starting my summer holidays. That's a few weeks' time. Then I should be able to get all those out. But they'll all be out before Legion comes out to show you those ones. And they have noted that they say they were caught out by the fact that some people like to just do professions. That's like their main thing in the game. I'm not sure why, because that's always been the case. There's always been people like that. And these people were disappointed because everyone was able to do professions. It was so easy. And not just your own professions. You could actually, you know, you could be, say, a leather worker and scribe, and you could have a blacksmith in your garrison and make some of the blacksmithing items. Yes, you wouldn't have access to some of the stuff, and it would take you longer to make the stuff, realistically, because you don't have the daily thing where you can craft your own set of the materials. But you could do it yourself. So it basically meant if everyone could do it, what was there for the dedicated profession, or professional, I should say, sorry. So they've designed the profession system such that to get the best out of it, you'll have to put actually a lot of time into it. It will have to be the thing you do most of all, which I'm not going to criticise, because I think it's nice if it's done well. It's going to hit me because I like my professions, but of course raiding is my main thing. So it's a case of I'm going to have to choose. I'll just have to be a bog standard tradesman, craftsman, whatever you want to call it. But, you know, if it does actually work well for those who want to be a crafter in the game, thumbs up from me. I'm not going to moan about that. I think a lot might, but I'm not. Then the next one. This is actually slightly old news, but we've just had clarification of it. We've known for some time that there's going to be a try before you buy character boost in Legion. In other words, when you have a character boost, you can boost a character up to whatever level you're boosting up to for a limited time. And then, you know, it sort of reverts back. So what they've said is the reason for this is because someone might boost a character, then decide it's not actually for them after all, because a character plays very differently at level 1 as it does to level 100 and then 110 and so on, which is fair enough. And maybe you'll think, oh, I've wasted my boost now. So what they're doing instead is there's a situation whereby you can try it out for a bit, see if you like it, and if you do, great. If you don't, maybe go back. I mean, it's not perfect, but to be fair to Blizzard, it's a good idea. I mean, sometimes you need to give it a really good go. You might need to months before you decide. You can't have everything, but I think this is a real good step. I do like this idea. So what it says is you can try the character out and play through the Broken Shore, get the artifact, and set up your order hall during this trial. If you like it, you can then boost to unlock it, making that a permanent character. Otherwise, you just lose it. Now, as many of you know, if you watch my channel regularly, you will know that raiding is my raison d'etre in this game. It is the main reason I play this game. If there was not the quality of raiding, I would not be playing this game anywhere near as much as I am, if at all. Simply the case that no MMO has anything like it. It's not even in the same league for endgame for me. Personally, there is nothing like World of Warcraft raiding in any MMO ever. So what they've said is about pacing. Now, I have said this before. It was really stark in World of Draenor, but it has been the case in the last few expansions, really, where the expansion comes out and then they hit you with lots of content. You're leveling up anyway, you're exploring the new world, blah, blah, blah. And then you're straight into your raids and they get the raid out. And then they bring out the second raid in a very timely manner. So a lot of people haven't actually finished the first raid. Very few, in fact, have. And they're bringing out the next one. It looks like, oh, yeah, there's loads of content. Content's coming thick and fast. But it's not. Because when you get to the end of it all, and it's all been brought out, you have this huge, long drought. So they've talked about the idea of pacing it better. And I have always said, the thing is, if you were to wait an extra week or two before bringing out each of these raids, who's going to complain? Actually, no one. The only people who are going to be slightly miffed would be the very top-end raiders. And even they're not going to moan about it too much because, you know, we like a bit of a break as well. It's nice to have a bit of a break between tiers where you just sort of do a quick day farm, one evening, a few hours, and then have a nice break. Fantastic. So no one is actually going to complain. So I hope that this is what they mean, that they're going to delay it for a little bit more. Let people level up, especially raiders, serious raiders. Sorry, if you're going to go straight into Mythic, you're in increasingly large number of guilds are going to have to do split runs. It's going to increasingly be the thing. So it's actually you're having to level up 2 characters and gear up 2 characters and get 2 characters through your order hall campaign as much as you can and get lots of order resources and get lots of artifact power and blah, 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 blah. And that's for the people who are just going to play one spec on each of those characters. What if you play multiple or you want to play multiple? Oh, my God. So hopefully what they mean by better paced is right from the start, just delay it. Just delay it. No one's in a... Okay, the world firsters, yes, they're in a bit of a rush. But at the same time, it's, they might appreciate a little bit more chill as they prepare for the first raid. Yes, I'm sure they'll be champing at the bit to go. But an extra week won't kill them, and it will help a lot of other people. Now it says, I'm going to read some of these out because these are the real key thing to, for me personally, the success of Legion. I'm not one of these people who says that, if there's things about the game I don't like, then it's really bad and everyone doesn't like it. I understand that everyone has their own likes and dislikes with the game. For me personally. So Legion will do better than any previous expansion at catering to both players who have burned through all the content in a new patch in a couple of months and those that took significantly longer with shorter play sessions. Now, of course, this statement is aspirational. It's good that they're thinking in those terms, but the proof of the pudding is in the eating, as we say in the UK. So we'll see how they actually do that in practice. But the fact that that is an aim of theirs is potentially good. I'd be more confident if they have had recent good track record of meeting their aspirational targets. They haven't, but, you keep giving them chances. World quests offer progression in smaller time increments than doing a dungeon or a raid. You can pick and choose them. Of course, it's the same with anything else. If you're a serious player, you're going to have to do everything you can, just like anything else. But, we're talking about for the majority of players. World quests will remain relevant for raiders throughout the entire expansion. Now, I know what happens when you get to level cap is you see that, you do the world quest. Some of it gives loot. It's like 805 item level, something like that. And then if your item level is round about that, it's like 810 or 815, I think it is. And then if your item level is actually round about the 815 mark-ish, then actually it drops 825. Now, it doesn't keep going up and up and up. You can't just get the best gear just from doing world quests. But this concept that when the next patch comes out, they could have it scale up again so that if your item level is whatever it happens to be, 900 or something, or 950, that it starts dropping gear that's a little bit of an upgrade for you as well. So maybe that's what they mean, that when the new patch comes out, even raiders in really good mythic gear can still get a little bit of an upgrade from doing some of the world quests. I don't know. Obviously, we wouldn't expect as raiders to be replacing our epic raid gear with stuff from just doing a world quest. So I don't know what they mean exactly by that. But the fact that the world quests are going to stay relevant, they're implying for more, because it says relevant for raiders. That's the interesting thing, relevant for raiders. Now, of course, that could just mean because we're always going to want order resources or we're always going to want artifact power, except we're not, because as soon as we've got them all up to max, are we really? So that's interesting. One big source of artifact power is world quests, so everyone will want to do them, it says. I read that as need to do them because that's actually what it means. World quests also provide the order resources, yes, so I've just mentioned that one as well. Now, it says it will take closer to months rather than weeks for players to max out their artifact traits. This is certainly how it's been building up in beta. It's now that it's stated, because it was never known before. The last time they even talked about timescale, they were not sure between weeks and months. We now know it'll be months. So what we now know, and this is going to, the theory crafters are going to read this and just go, oh my God. Because in a way, I'm cool with this. But what it means is people are now going to want to know what path to take, because if your artifact weapon is not going to be maxed out when you're doing the initial raids, and if they're saying months, what they're actually meaning is the first raid will be completely cleared. Maybe even the second raid. What do they mean by months? Do they mean 3 months? 4 months? I would guess at least 3 months. In which case, you can't have all the traits of which traits are going to be best for you on balance, because some will be better on some fights and some on others. And it's like, it's not like a talent where you can switch it out, although no longer on demand. So that's an interesting one. It's I'm not sure it's a good move by Blizzard. I understand. See, there's two sides to this. One is that the artifact system, if you are just going to be able to get all the artifact traits on it within a few weeks, you'd say, what's the point at all? what is actually the point, because when you're not even a quarter of the way through the expansion, you've got it all done. So the fact that it will take you through the expansion to get these things maxed out makes it more relevant. At the same time, it also makes it really important that you think very, very carefully about which traits you're going to unlock and in which order, because especially if you leave it for a bit, it becomes increasingly expensive to just change it all. Dungeon, they talked about dungeons. We know the importance of dungeons in Legion. If you don't, then that's they're going to basically scale. The mythic ones are going to scale. So the better players, or the better groups, I should say, each week will level up their keyscale, which is something you take in with you to beat. If every time you beat the timer, this keyscale becomes more powerful. So you get more disadvantages the next time you go in there. Enemies become stronger or faster or whatever, but you get better loot. So that way everyone gets the benefit of it. And in fact, dungeons can be a path to top level PvE, just like raids. I suspect it'll always be a little bit less, and it should be as well. It's an MMO, it's a fantasy game. The idea of the epic encounter surely has to be the pinnacle. But maybe not a pinnacle that's way, way up there, maybe just a bit above. I think will satisfy a lot of people. Another thing, I mean, a lot of people have talked about the amounts of damage, and again, it's gone up and up and up and up. There will be a stat squish after Legion. So the expansion after Legion will see another stat squish, not Legion itself. So get to contend with the big, big numbers that are coming. I mean, the numbers are pretty huge in many respects. I mean, you've got like, you get to level 110, you've got close to, without even being a tank, 1.5 million health. What it's going to be like at the end, I can only imagine. But then a squish in the next one. I mean, to be fair to them, you think, why not squishing Legion? I think there's a lot of work that goes into a squish, because you've got to bear in mind, with so many levels now, actually having some sort of scaling from level 1 all the way up to level 110 it will be. It's quite a challenge, I think, and takes a certain amount of time. And I think, to be fair to Blizzard, they couldn't afford to take the time on developing anything that wasn't necessary. They've taken such a whack from the lack of varied content in World of Draenor. They cannot afford to be complacent, and so I think we can understand why they wouldn't then divert resources into something that isn't absolutely essential, is just there for because people don't want to deal with big numbers. On the issue of tanking, now I'm not really a fan of tanking, even though I will do some soon. I have promised people I'll do a little bit soon. But there was something quite interesting that was mentioned about tanking. It says there's still room for improvement as far as having both tanks actively doing something rather than swapping back and forth. This has been the pattern for some time. That it wasn't the case originally with a lot of raid bosses, but it is now the case that you have your one boss, you have your two tanks. There's a few fights where you might have a third tank. That's usually for like ad situations, but usually you've got two main tanks, and they effectively just taunt off each other after some mechanic or just before some mechanic or whatever the hell. And it's not very satisfying. Certainly, it's not something I particularly enjoy. So all you're doing in many cases is either waiting for your boss mods to flash up that something's happened, or see that something's happened, see that something's cast, or looking at a debuff, having the other tank as the focus target and watching out for a debuff or so many stacks of a debuff and then taunting. So they're talking about having the second tank actively do something in fights as well, to add a bit of interest to that. It says here, in the long ago past, the team just made fights that needed a specific number of tanks. And that was sort of the case as well. And usually what you did is, of course, the tanks that then weren't needed just went DPS. But now that they're much more specialised, I think that's not feasible these days. And also a lot of tanks, I find, a lot of like main tanks are usually quite ambivalent towards the idea of being DPS. They just do not play a DPS spec of their class. So, they're tanks through and through. A lot of people just like that role. So they also talked about the talent and spec swapping thing. Now, what happened was, couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks ago, they talked about this change and then implemented this change where you can only change your talents in town or in a rest area. So you can't change it in a dungeon or even out in the world when you're soloing. And certainly not in a raid or anything like that, except with an expensive consumable. Now, there's been a lot of talk about this. I mean, for a start, the fact that you can make the consumable, as everyone has said, everyone I've heard talk about this, and as I said at the time, if you're going to have the consumable anyway, then that means you're happy with people to change spec during dungeons and raids. And if you're not happy for them to do it, why have the consumable? And as I said it, and as other people have said after me, I just suspect it's something for inscription to be useful for beyond just like Dark Moon trinkets or something. So the fact that they're going to talk about, but there was huge backlash, yeah. So there was a huge backlash. Lots of people saying this is bad. We do not like this. So with the response now, you can start to dip your toe in the water. You can say, if they say the same thing as they did before, it looks like they're digging their heels in. Now, we know from flying that doesn't necessarily mean that's the end of it. But it does mean they're prepared to dig their heels in and weather the storm of complaints. However, if they look like they're pulling it back a little bit, maybe that means that they'll be willing to pull it back a bit more. They have basically just come out with the same justification. And again, saying, well, you can change specs free, as if that changes anything. I don't think me having changing to holy for bosses and being retribution on trash is necessarily solving the problem, but there you go. But the fact that they're saying the same thing and providing the justification does mean that they are, at the moment at least, digging their heels in. And because it's now so close, it's got to be quite close, the pre-Legion patch, as in 5 weeks away, maybe, something like that. If the, whatever comes out then, they've sort of got to stick to. On the issue of artifact weapons, now, huge alleged spoiler here, in that it is there is some information which has a certain amount of veracity, but these things are always ever rumours until they've been officially confirmed, and this will never be officially confirmed until the alpha comes out and NDAs are lifted for the next expansion, or they announce it at BlizzCon. But there is a certain, basically someone's come out with some information who a lot of people consider to be reliable, and it basically tells you a lot of stuff that's planned for Legion and the end of Legion that is not publicly known. Or rather it is, but it's not confirmed. So it could be true. It could be completely untrue. Just because this person has been reliable in the past does not mean they are now. Always take everything with a pinch of salt. However, a lot of people like this because a lot of the information they came out with it before stuff in the alpha and beta was public knowledge, and a certain amount of it has been quite accurate. Big build up. It's a big spoiler. And it is that the next expansion will be a Naga Old Gods themed expansion. Makes a certain amount of sense. But it's where it comes with art and artifact weapons that's interesting. It's said that as part of the pre-expansion, or the launch event, I should say, I think, you will have to use your artifact weapon to avert some crisis and basically drain its power. Some codswallop. In other words, it's a device to get rid of the artifact weapon as if it was just a Legion thing. Now, to my mind, saying that is a little bit strange, because what if people really like them? You could easily extend it so that, there are no more weapons, it's just the artifact weapon and you just do something else with it. Now, they've said here that that's exactly what they are sort of plan to do. With what will happen with artifact weapons, it sort of depends on what people feel about them. Now, we could read that in two ways. We could read that in there being what I think a lot of people would consider sensible, and just seeing, do people get on with the artifacts? Do they want them to carry on into the next expansion, and we maybe do something else with the traits? Maybe get rid of the Legion traits and put new ones in, and we'd rinse and repeat, or just do something completely different with them? Or do we get rid of them? Another way you could read this is that they are genuinely planning to get rid of them. They're behaving like politicians in that they are saying that they're going to wait to see how the customers respond. But ultimately, we've seen them do this before. Ultimately, they could just say, well, actually, our research suggests that most people are actually in favour of getting rid of them, so that's what we're going to do. And they can just make that up. And we know it's made up because they never poll us about anything, so we know that they never have this information. The only feedback that's ever provided to Blizzard is public anyway. We can see what that feedback is. Because unless people take the trouble to write physical letters, which I'm sure some do, then that's, all feedback is effectively public. So they could just do that. So who knows? Who knows on that one? But I would like to take them at face value and say that they're probably just hanging fire. And they've got a plan for either way. Maybe it's just that. Another thing it says now, we were told that if we bought if we pre-ordered Legion, then we'd be able to play Demon Hunters before Legion launched. An assumption, certainly from my point of view with this, was that means that when the pre-Legion patch comes out, we can play Demon Hunters. Doesn't seem quite that. They say that the pre-expansion patch will contain things like the class changes, of course, and the new transmog system. Yeah, all the mechanical things will be there, as it always is. But then it says, a couple of weeks after it's released, Demon Hunters and the Broken Shore event and the Demon Invasion. So in other words, we're going to get a couple of weeks grace where we're just having the new mechanics of Legion, class changes, transmog, without the content. So that again adds some veracity to the idea that this might be coming out mid-July, because it wouldn't make sense for it to come out, say, beginning of August. 2 weeks later, a mere 2 weeks before Legion launches, then we get all this other stuff. That wouldn't make sense to me anyway. So maybe that's adding a bit more. Yes, this thing will come out in mid-July. And someone's probably watching this now, and the information is probably being released at exactly when it is. They're going, yes, of course it is, you fool. Or, of course, no, it's not, you fool. But, yeah. And as I suspected, one little snippet here, so I can breathe a bit of a sigh of relief in one way and not in another, I don't know. It says no major redesigns are planned for any classes as of now, but there's still plenty of tuning and tweaking to be done. Now, there's a lot of people still not happy with the philosophy for their class or spec, whatever, for Legion. I brought out the first guide for Retribution Paladins anyway, because I believe the baseline abilities were set. They basically seem to be saying that. Still tuning, they've said, still tweaking, which is what they seem to be doing with the talents, and even that, less of that now. So we can basically say that how they are in the Legion beta is how they're going to be. If certain abilities are doing too much damage, sure, they'll be tuned down. If some are doing too little damage, they'll be tuned up. But the way it works, the mechanics, that's it. Maybe they move some talents around. Maybe they change a talent slightly. But as they've just said there, no major redesigns. That basically means they're not going to change the way it fundamentally works. So my guide's safe. It means I don't have to do another one and go, oh yeah, by the way, ignore that one, which is what I was fearing. The 2 dungeons in Suramar have a mini attunement requiring you to play through Suramar to gain access. So that's sort of okay. It's a way of time gating without time gating. They seem to have been quite keen to say no real time gating on anything, but it's more like content gating, same sort of thing. But it is a better one because just it's a bit more subtle, because it means if you play it more often, you get through there quicker, and that's fine. We're okay with that. terms of artifacts, again, I mean, there's quite a lot of information here. It says legendary relics are likely to be added at some point. So in terms of the relics, these are the things you add to your artifact weapon to increase their item level, and they always have like a trait on them that increases it. And just like, you know, with anything else, you've got green quality ones, blue quality ones, purple epic quality ones. You're going to have legendary quality ones, which won't just increase the item level by a lot more. It says changing the artifact more than the current relics. I mean, that's the definition of legendary. It's not supposed to be just a step up from epic. It's supposed to have something extra, some extra bang for your buck. Here's the thing. Now, here we come back to the pacing. Again, that I was talking about earlier. The gap between Highmall and Blackrock Foundry was too short. Yes, it was. But, and I agree with that. I know. So they're going to increase that. It doesn't suggest, they're not saying the gap between the launch and Highmall was too short. To be honest, for WoD, it wasn't. But that same gap for Legion wouldn't work because there's so much extra to do to get ready for Legion. But what they've said is the gap between Blackrock Foundry and Hellfire Citadel was too long. I don't think I agree with that. And I don't like where that's going. So it implies they're going to increase the gap between the first two, like Emerald Dream and Nighthold, but then increase it, or reduce the gap, sorry, I should say, before like the next tier. It's not going to help the pacing of the whole expansion if they do that. But they do insist, again, because it's different. I mean, I'm reading from like different developers saying things here. Legion has better content pacing plan. In their opinion, of course, the people who've come up with this plan. We'll just have to see. But the fact that they're aware that the pacing has been an issue, which they have never previously, to my knowledge, admitted. And yeah, you know, we've known about this for years. The team doesn't want you to feel like you should change your talents for every group of mobs or bosses. This is something I want to pick up in a discussion about talent specifically. Again, there's a few threads in here that I want to do a full video of. This is already getting fairly long anyway. So I'm going to wrap this up quite quickly, but there is one other thing I want to just pick on, and it is legendary items. So what we've wanted to know is where the legendary items... I kept joking for a while that I don't like the idea of legendary items dropping off squirrels. Of course, we know they won't drop off squirrels. Critters don't drop loot. But they've now said where we're going to get them from. And I am slightly encouraged by this. Legendary items come from dungeon bosses, raid bosses, and world quest caches. They have already said that they have a better drop rate off the harder content stuff. So we can imagine that the world quest caches will have the lowest chance for it to drop. The dungeons will have next, and then the incremental difficulties of raids next. They've also said long before that legendaries are essentially farmable. So I suppose this means that particular bosses, if they're going to drop a legendary at all, it will be like this particular legendary. Same with the world quests. So that's how. All you have to do is know which of the legendaries, especially the ones you want, drop where, and then just try. I mean, for raids, of course, you'll just do the raids naturally and just hope for the best. But for dungeons and world quests, of course, you can target a little bit more. So that I am encouraged with. If we must have this legendary system at all, the fact that it's not just, because I was fearing it just drops off random mobs and things like that. And it's like you're just trusting to look too much. There's still going to be huge RNG on this. There is still going to be huge RNG, and it's not good. But yes, I've moaned enough about legendaries anyway. But the fact that it's just going to come off cash drops and dungeons and raids, okay, that's at least better. So that wraps up the main points of interest from my point of view. Went on for quite a long time, but that's because there's been a lot of news this week. So we're back next week with what I think will be the news stories of next week. And of course, I've got several videos coming out this weekend as well. If you found it enjoyable or interesting, or some combination of the both, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. And until next time, I'll see you later.